Honda is not here in this rendering. So we'll see how far we get. Probably go into something of the epilogue. I guess that's Ayodhya Kanda. The following morning, back to Ayodhya is the title of the chapter. The following morning, Vibhishan approached Ram and told him his bath was ready. The Rakshasa said, hot and cold baths, as well as every sort of cosmetic, unguents, and perfume are ready. And we have prepared heavenly garments and garlands. Excellent maidservants, well versed in the arts of decoration, are at your service, O Ram. No thanks. Ram replied that he had no desire for any kind of pleasure until after he had seen Bharata. He told Vibhishan, that prince is now living in austerity. He bathes in cold rivers and eats only roots and fruits gleaned from the forest. How can I accept any luxuries? Ram asked Vibhishan to find some means by which he could return quickly to Ayodhya. Easy. Vibhishan replied that the heavenly Pushpaka chariot was available. Ravana took this chariot, which moves according to one's will, from Kuvera. It still remains in Lanka, desiring to render you some service, O Ram. Vibhishan bowed low before Ram and repeatedly requested him to stay for a while in Lanka and accept his hospitality, but Ram was anxious to depart. He thought of his mother and of Bharata, how they must long to see him again. His exile was now over. He had promised to return immediately. If he did not return, they would surely be consumed by grief and anxiety. Bharata might even give up his life. That was exactly what his plan was. Ram said, you have already fully honored me with your first-class counsel and advice. You have served me well on the battlefield, and I am deeply indebted to you. But now you must grant me leave, O valiant Rakshasa. My task is accomplished, and I must return quickly to Ayodhya. Vibhishan acceded. He at once invoked the Pushpaka, and it appeared in the sky. Ram gazed at it with wonder, at the glowing golden chariot with its lofty jewel-encrusted mansions and countless golden trellises wreathed with garlands of heavenly flowers. After inviting Ram to board the chariot, Vibhishan said, is there any final service I can render you before you leave? Ram asked the Rakshasa to bestow riches upon all the monkeys. Give them abundant gold and jewels to take back with them. The king should always reward his army. They should be well cared for and given everything they desire, for they must lay down their lives for his sake. Vibhishan at once made arrangement for profuse wealth to be distributed to the monkeys. Then he helped Ram and Sita to ascend the chariot. Ram again thanked Vibhishan for his service, and the Rakshasa sorrowfully watched him prepare to leave. Just as Ram was about to depart, Sugriva approached him. Oh, Ram, pray, take the monkeys with you, he begged. We all desire to see you installed as the emperor. After that, we will return to our own lands. Ram smiled and agreed. He invited all the monkeys to mount the celestial chariot, which was like a golden city. Looking at Vibhishan, he added, you too should accompany me, O noble one. With all your kinfolk and friends, please mount this chariot and come to Ayodhya. Doesn't say what the weight limit was for their luggage and everything. Once everyone was on board, the Pushpaka rose high into the air. It flew gracefully with an image of a great swan at its front, seeming to draw it along. As it flew, Ram pointed out to Sita the sights below. He showed her the battlefield, telling her how all the principal Rakshasas had been slain. While they crossed the sea, he explained how Hanuman had leaped to Lanka. As the chariot reached Kishkinda, Ram had it stop, and he told Sugriva, "Quickly descend and fetch your wives and kinsfolk, O monkey. They too should be brought to Ayodhya." With all the monkeys back aboard, the chariot continued. Soon they passed over the forest where Ram had spent his exile. When they reached Bharadraja's hermitage, Ram desired to meet with the rishi. He stopped the chariot and went down to see the sage. Bowing low before him, Bharadraj offered his blessings and informed Ram that Bharata was anxious to see him. The sage knew of everything in Ayodhya from his disciples who visited the city frequently. He told Ram that everyone was expecting his return at any moment. Ram replied, "Please exert your power and make all the trees surrounding Ayodhya filled with heavenly fruits. All those who will travel to the city to witness my coronation should be amply fed." At once Bharadraj meditated, and by his mystic power, all the trees for 20 miles around Ayodhya became heavy with fruits. The sage said to Ram, "You should enter Ayodhya tomorrow after sending ahead a messenger." Ram agreed and turned to Hanuman. He asked the monkey to proceed ahead to the city and inform Bharata that he would arrive soon. On the way, the monkey should stop at Shringavera and inform Guha of the news. Ram then said to Hanuman, "Closely observe Bharata's features when you tell him that I am returning. I wish to know his reaction." A kingdom rich in lands and wealth could surely attract anyone's mind. If he has developed an attraction for the kingdom, then I shall let him continue to rule as emperor. Hanuman left at once. He bounded swiftly through the forest lands and soon reached Guha's abode, telling him the happy news. The Nishata king was overjoyed, and he immediately set about preparing to leave for Ayodhya. Without delay, Hanuman continued on to Ayodhya, and he arrived early the following morning. At a distance of 2 miles from the city, he found Bharata's dwelling. There he saw the prince, clad in black deerskins, emaciated from fasting, his hair matted. He sat by his wooden hut and shone with ascetic glory, and he was surrounded by his ministers and priests, dressed in similar ascetic clothing. Hanuman approached Bharata and found him continuously repeating Ram's name. The monkey at once lay flat on the ground, offering his obeisances. Then, with folded palms, he stood before the prince and said, "Having completed his exile and slain Ravana, Ram will soon arrive, accompanied by Sita and Lakshmana. He has asked after your welfare, and he longs to be reunited with you." Bharata was overwhelmed with joy and sank to the ground in a faint. That was not intentional. Was that your computer?
Yeah.
Ah. Does it have other sound effects? What happens when the coronation happens? Fireworks or something? I hope not. After regaining consciousness, he stood up and embraced Hanuman. Now, they haven't met before. He's embracing a monkey, and he didn't even ask, like, "Who are you?" Maybe he heard about him or something. The prince shed tears of happiness, and he spoke in an exuberant voice. "Oh, monkey, I do not know if you're a god, a rishi, or what, but what you have told me, you have told me the most wonderful news. I shall give you 100,000 cows and many beautiful maidens." What's he going to do with maidens? He's a brahmachari. Right? Adorned with gold and jewels. Bharata asked Hanuman to tell him in full what had happened to Ram since his departure. He's got to tell the whole Ramayana. Gosh, how many hours is that going to take? And the monkey recounted the tale. Bharata was delighted. He told Shatrughna to go into the city and spread the news of Ram's impending return. Bharata ordered that the city be fully decorated with pennants and garlands, and everyone should come out to greet Ram. Hanuman could easily understand Bharata's heart. Ram should have no doubt about his brother. His devotion for Ram was obviously no less than the devotion Hanuman himself felt. The monkey shed tears of joy as he witnessed Bharata's display of love for Ram. Shatrughna, along with Bharata's ministers, went into the city and began to prepare. They had Kaushalya and Sumitra placed upon palanquins and brought to Nandigram. Nandigram is where Bharata was living. Behind them came thousands of citizens, some walking, some on elephants or horseback, and others in chariots. The blast of conches and the roll of drums was tumultuous. A great roar came from the huge crowds, and it appeared as if the entire population of Ayodhya had come out of the city. The 14 years of Ram's exile had already ended, and all the citizens longed only for his return. Many other monarchs were also present in Ayodhya, having been invited by Bharata to be present when Ram returned. By the end of the day, the whole region of Nandigram was completely crowded with people, all hoping for a glimpse of Ram. Bharata stood gazing to the south. He felt anxious. Had this monkey been telling the truth? Was Ram really about to return? When would he arrive? He questioned Hanuman again and again, and the monkey repeatedly assured him. Suddenly, Bharata saw in the distance the shining pushpaka. No, Hanuman didn't go back and inform him. I thought he went back and informed him. No, he just stayed. So how did Ram know that the coast is clear? Text message, that's what he did. Oh, Krishna. Suddenly, Bharata saw in the distance the shining pushpaka. Hanuman then shouted, pointing it out to Bharata. "Here comes the highly glorious Ram," he cried. The shout was echoed by the crowd of citizens, and a great clamor arose. They looked with amazement at the celestial vehicle carrying Ram and Sita, which appeared above the horizon like the sun and moon joined together. Bharata fell to the ground like a rod, offering his prostrated obeisances with his arms outstretched toward the chariot. The pushpaka descended to earth, and Ram dismounted along with Lakshmana and Sita. Bharata ran over to them with Shatrughna, and the four brothers embraced each other for a long time. All the principal monkeys, headed by Sugriva, Angada, and Hanuman, assumed human forms and disembarked from the chariot. Along with Bibhishan, they were greeted warmly by Bharata, who embraced them all. Bharata said to', "You were like a fifth brother to us all, O Monkey King." Ram saw Kaushalya nearby, and he broke free from the crowd of people who were pressing in around him. Quickly approaching his mother, he fell before her and clasped her feet. She was pale and emaciated through grief and separation from her son. Next to her was Sumitra, who appeared in a similar condition. Ram also bowed before her and touched her feet with reverence. As they met Ram, the faces of both of those ladies looked like celestial lotuses in full bloom. Ram greeted Kaikeyi and the other royal ladies who had come there. Doesn't say how he greeted her. He offered his obeisances to Vishishta and the Brahmins, who uttered auspicious hymns from the Vedas. Ram then bowed at the feet of his father-in-law Janaka, who shed tears of joy to see him returned safe with Sita. As he stood up and looked around, Ram smiled at the citizens, bringing joy to their hearts. Bharata brought Ram's sandals, which had been kept upon Ayodhya's throne. He placed them before Ram and said, "Here is the entire kingdom, held in trust by me on your behalf. Now I render it back to you, O Ram. My birth has borne fruit today, and my deepest desire is fulfilled, for I see you returned as the king of Ayodhya." Bharata told Ram that everything in the kingdom, its exchequer, storehouses, army and crops, had increased tenfold while he was gone. "All this is due to your influence alone, O Ram, for I ruled the kingdom thinking only of your example." Ram embraced Bharata again and again, and the two brothers shed tears of joy, seeing the display of affection between them. The monkeys and Vibhishan wept. Ram then looked up at the Pushpaka and said, "O Pushpaka, you may now return to your master Kuvera. I thank you for your service." The heavenly chariot then rose into the sky and disappeared. When everyone was seated, Bharata addressed Ram, "Please, assume the rulership of this world. Although I have officiated in your absence, I can no more rule in your presence than a candle can give light in the presence of the sun. Let the world see you shining with dazzling splendor after being consecrated upon the throne of Ayodhya. We all long only for this, O Raghava." Ram replied, "Let it be so." And a great cheer went up from the assembly. Ram then had the royal barbers cut his hair, which is still in a mass of matted locks. He took his bath and dressed in costly silks and brilliant gold ornaments. Many garlands of celestial flowers were hung around his neck, and he was dabbed with sandalwood paste of various colors. Emperor Dasarath's widows dressed and decorated Sita. Her splendid beauty captivated the soul of whoever looked upon her. When Ram and his three brothers were all prepared, Bharata summoned Sumantra and the royal chariot. He personally took the reins, and Ram climbed aboard with Sita. As the chariot proceeded toward the city, Lakshman and Vibhishan fanned Ram on either side with white whisks, while Shatrughna held the royal parasol over his head. Hundreds of sages walked in front of the chariot, chanting mantras and hymns. Behind the chariot came Sugriva, still in human semblance, riding upon a great elephant, and followed by 9,000 other elephants bearing other monkeys. The procession moved in state through Ayodhya, accompanied by the blast of countless conchas and the roll of thousands of drums. They were followed by crowds of citizens, all anxious to see Ram's coronation. The city streets were beautifully decorated with flags and garlands. From the balconies of the mansions, women threw handfuls of flower petals and parched rice. Ram looked around at everyone and smiled, raising his hand in blessing. Ram entered his father's palace and ordered Bharata to take Sugriva to his own palace. Bharata then left Ram to rest for the night, and after arranging for all the monkeys' accommodation, he told Sugriva, "The coronation will take place tomorrow. Please arrange to fetch water from the ocean and rivers." That's like a lot of travel in one day. Sugriva agreed and summoned Hanuman, Jambavan, Rishabha, and Gavaya. He gave each of them a golden pail encrusted with gems and told them to bring water from each of the 4 oceans to the north, south, east, and west. Ocean to the north? That's like the Arctic Ocean or something. Whew. They better travel fast. The monkeys bounded away and swiftly carried out the order. Another 500 monkeys fetched water from different sacred rivers all over the country. By morning, all this water had been given to Vishishta for the ceremony. They didn't even stop for lunch. The coronation began early in the morning, and Ram was ritualistically bathed by the Brahmins. 16 beautiful virgin girls consecrated him in accordance with the scriptural procedure. Following this, Ram was bathed by his ministers and chief warriors, and then by the leaders of the trading community. From the air, the 4 guardians of the worlds sprinkled Ram with celestial nectar. When the bathing was over, Vishishta had the crown placed on Ram's head. The crown had been created by Brahma and was first worn by Manu himself. It shone with the brilliance of the sun. Wearing that golden crown, and seated upon a throne made of precious stones, Ram was radiant and difficult to behold. Seated next to him was the exquisitely adorned Sita, enhancing Ram's grandeur and magnificence. Vayu came in person and presented to Ram an unfading garland of 100 celestial lotuses, which imbued its wearer with unfailing vigor and energy. At the urging of Indra, he also gave Ram a priceless necklace of pearls interspersed with heavenly jewels of every variety. Taking that necklace, Ram turned and placed it on Sita's breast. She immediately lifted it in her 2 delicate hands and glanced over at Hanuman. Understanding her desire, Hanuman knelt before the princess, and she placed the necklace over his head. Rising up again with that celestial ornament on his chest, Hanuman appeared like a dark thundercloud decorated with lightning bolts. Gandharvas sang while the Apsaras danced their mind-stealing dances, filled with movements and gestures deep with meaning. The huge crowds cried out, "Victory to Ram!" and "All glories to Sita and Ram." Only 1 paragraph left and we're done. The earth itself seemed to rejoice and gave forth abundant crops and fruits, as well as flowers which released a delightful fragrance carried on gentle breezes. The gods filled the canopy of the sky, and all the divine beings experienced the highest ecstasy upon seeing Ram united with Sita. Last paragraph is 2 sentences. Ram turned to Sita and smiled. His purpose was fulfilled. But it doesn't say the end. There's epilogue. How long is the epilogue? Well, we won't finish the whole epilogue. Too long. A month had passed since the coronation. Gradually the celebrations ended and life in Ayodhya returned to normal. Knowing that his guests were thinking of returning to their own kingdoms, Ram began to say his farewells. He spoke first to his father-in-law Janak, who had been staying with him in his palace. Folding his palms in reverence, Ram said, "My lord, surely you are our immovable support. We stand protected by you, O king. By virtue of your ascetic power and your blessings, I was able to slay Ravana. The bonds of affection between our two families are unbreakable. Please accept these gifts, and then feel free to proceed back to Mithila at your pleasure. Bharata and Shatrughna will follow at your heels to escort you there." Tears filled Janaka's eyes as he witnessed Ram's humility. He looked over at the great pile of riches Ram was offering him. "I feel gratified simply by your sight, O Ram. Let all this wealth be bestowed upon my daughter Sita. I have no wish to leave, but duty dictates that I return to Mithila. I shall now depart, but my mind will never leave you." Janaka rose to leave and tightly embraced Ram. He then went out of the chamber, followed by his ministers and Bharat and Shatrughna. One by one, Ram said fond farewells to all of the other kings who had come for the coronation, offering each of them gold and other wealth as parting gifts. Those kings all expressed their sorrow to be leaving and gazed at Ram's face without feeling satiated. After circumambulating him in respect, they gathered together their followers and armies and slowly marched out of Ayodhya. The earth shook as the many hundreds of kings and princes left the city in their golden chariots accompanied by their multitude of troops. As they left, they expressed their disappointment that they and their armies had not been able to join Ram in his fight against Ravana. "Surely this great display of might is useless, as we were not able to engage it in Ram's service," they lamented. "Bharata summoned us too late." When all the kings had gone, Ram spoke with the monkey chiefs. He thanked them again for their service and embraced them with love. Taking valuable ornaments from his own body, Ram placed them on the bodies of Angada and Hanuman. He spoke affectionately to all the monkeys, offering them profuse quantities of riches. "O Vanras, you should depart now for Kishkinda. Rule over your subjects with justice and love. You have all rendered me a great, very great service, which I shall never forget." Hanuman kneeled before Ram with folded palms, said, "O Ram, I do not know how I can leave you. I have one request before I go. Please, let my supreme affection for you stand forever. May my devotion remain constant, and may life remain in my body for as long as your story is being told on this earth. Let me stay in some heavenly region, continuously hearing your story being told to me by apsaras and other celestial beings. In this way, my pain of separation from you will be allayed." Ram smiled. "It shall be so, O Prince of Monkeys. Your life and indeed your fame Your fame will endure for as long as my story lasts in this world. That will be for as long as the worlds themselves last. I am forever indebted to you, O monkey. May my obligation to you stay always in my heart. May the time never come when I need to repay your service, for such times are times of difficulty. The monkeys, who felt as if the past month in Ram's company had been only a day, reluctantly departed from Ayodhya, their eyes filled with tears and their minds absorbed in thoughts of Ram. Ram then said his farewell to Vibhishan, asking him to rule Lanka with righteousness. He also instructed the Pushpaka chariot to make its way back to Kuvera. He already did that. Within a few days, everyone had left, and Ram began to rule his rule of Ayodhya, assisted with Lakshmana and guided by the rishis. Within some days of his guest's departure, Ram was visited by a number of great sages headed by Agastya. After they had been received with all respect by Ram, they took their seats in his assembly hall. Questioned by Ram, Agastya related everything about Ravana's birth and history, as well as that of all the principal Rakshasas. And our celebrated note-taker here. Confirmed. The sage, that's Agastya, also told the royal court about the history of the great Vanaras. That was whole kanda, just one paragraph. After Agastya had finished speaking, Ram said, "Oh, powerful sage, I'm amazed at hearing your wonderful narrations. By your very sight, we have all been blessed, but I have one request. Soon I shall perform sacrifices for the good of the world. Please bless me that these will be successful. Indeed, if it pleases you, then come again to Ayodhya at that time to grace us with your holy presence." Ram requested all the sages to attend his sacrifice, and they replied, "It shall be so." Then they rose in a body and left the assembly. And then there's a break in the text. As Ram ruled over Ayodhya, everything became auspicious. It was seen that nobody died prematurely, nor was there any fear of diseases. How's that? The world had no robbers, and no one suffered any harm from others. Every creature felt pleased, and all men were devoted to righteousness. They performed all their duties as service to Ram, and they always thought of him within their hearts. Rains fell when desired. Not like today. It was really terrible. And the earth gave forth abundant produce. All people had everything they needed and were fully satisfied, being free from avarice. 2 years passed. Hear the drum roll. One day, Ram was walking with Sita in the palace gardens. Having just heard that she had become pregnant, he smiled broadly and exclaimed, "Excellent! Oh, beautiful lady, tell me, what desire of yours should be fulfilled?" As they strolled, Sita admired the many blossoming trees and bushes in the garden. She was reminded of her time with Ram in the forest. Remembering the celestial beauty of the forest, she said, "O Lord, I have a longing to once more visit the penance groves inhabited by the sages. Let me stay there for a night at the feet of those rishis." Ram squeezed Sita's hand. "O princess, it shall be so. You will surely go tomorrow." You hear the drum roll, right? We know what's coming. The couple sat down in a shaded bower, where they were entertained by Apsara and Naga damsels, who danced to the exquisite music played by the Gandharvas. Soon the sun set, and they retired for the evening into the palace's inner chambers. The following morning, after he had performed his religious rituals, Ram entered his council hall. Taking his seat on a great golden throne, he inquired from his chief minister, "Oh, Bhadra, tell me, what are the talks of the people? What do they say about me and about my rule? Kings who are not devoted to duty are criticized everywhere." With joined palms, Bhadra replied, "O king, delightful are the talks I have heard from the people. Mostly they discuss your conquest over Ravan and recovery of Mother Sita." Paragraph. Bhadra glanced downward as he spoke, and Ram, catching the gesture, asked, "What else did they say, O minister? Leave nothing out. Tell me both the good and the ill words which are spoken. I shall then know what must be done by myself. O Bhadra, speak without any fear or anguish." Bhadra took a deep breath. "O Lord, listen as I relate the words I have heard while moving among the people. Everywhere, in the marketplaces, public squares, crossroads, and in the forests, the people are heard to recite the glories of your wonderful victory. However, O great emperor, I've also heard criticism." Bhadra described how some of the citizens were questioning Ram's acceptance of Sita back into his home. Quote, "They say that the princess, having been taken unto Ravana's lap and kept by him for almost 1 year, cannot now be considered pure. Because, O Ram, you have allowed her back into your house, these people say they will have to tolerate similar unchaste behavior from their own wives. Whatever a king does becomes acceptable behavior for all the people." Bhadra looked down at the mosaic floor. Tears fell from the corners of his eyes. He had not wanted to tell his master about the criticisms, but he knew that nothing could be kept concealed from Ram. Ram appeared shocked. He looked around at his other ministers. Is this true? Are there such talks indulged in by the citizens? All the ministers appeared aggrieved. They affirmed what Bhadra had said, each of them bowing low before Ram as he spoke. Ram became pensive. He dismissed the court and asked that Lakshman be summoned. As the prince entered the court, he saw Ram sitting with downcast expression, seeming like an eclipsed sun. He hurried to his side and asked what was wrong. Ram explained everything and then said, "Dear brother, the calumny, misfortune, right? Misfortune, calumny. Who's got a cell phone? C-A-L-U-M-N-Y. C-A-L-U-M-N-Y. Eats into my very vitals." Louder? What? What? What does it say?
So making of false and defamatory statements about something in order
Making of false statements.
to damage husband.
Like gossip. Gossip.
The act of uttering false charges
Okay. The act of uttering false.
and misrepresentation intended to harm others' reputation.
Okay. Calumny. I've heard that before. Okay. Dear brother, the calumny of the people eats into my very vitals. It can never be tolerated by a virtuous monarch Surely I knew that this criticism would ensue, and thus did I test Sita at the time of her return. However, it seems that even though the gods have attested to her purity, the citizens are still not satisfied. Alas, surely one's infamy is easily proclaimed in this world, unquote. Ram shook his head and went on. Infamy is to be avoided by all means. It is censured even by the gods. As long as one's infamy remains current on earth, one stays in hell. Great souls always endeavor for fame and good repute in this world. To avoid disrepute, I would give up my brothers or even my own life, what to speak of Sita. You hear the drum roll, right? Ram instructed the astonished Lakshman to immediately take Sita out of Ayodhya and into the forest where she should be left. She was already expecting to go there for a visit, so he would not need to tell her the truth. What? Ram spoke gravely. I will not hear any arguments against this, dear brother. Sita should be taken this very day to Valmiki's ashram, which lies on the bank of the Ganges. After leaving her there, come back alone to Ayodhya. Ooh. Having spoken, Ram left the court and went with his heavy heart to his personal quarters. Lakshmana slowly made his way towards Sita's rooms. Surely this was the most difficult task he had ever faced. If it were left to him, thought Lakshman, he would go out and find the men who were criticizing Ram and put them straight. Where was the question that Sita could ever be unchaste? What fault had Ram committed? But Ram's order could not be avoided. Lakshmana had Sumantra prepare his chariot, and he went before Sita, telling her that Ram had asked him to fulfill her desire to visit the forest. Highly pleased, Sita asked her servants to gather together many costly garments and precious jewels. I shall distribute these to the wives of the rishis, she said, smiling. Lakshman said nothing in reply. He turned and walked toward the chariot, with Sita following behind. As she walked, she began to notice unusual omens. She spoke in surprise. Oh, son of Sumitra, why is it that my right eye throbs and my limbs shiver? My heart feels heavy and my mind is filled with anxiety. The earth itself seems distressed, and all quarters appear desolate. May all be well with my Lord, and indeed with all living beings. Sita prayed with folded hands as she made her way out of the palace. Reaching the chariot, Lakshman said, All is well, O Queen. There is no cause for fear. I think your mind is disturbed at the thought of separation from Ram for even a day. Ascend the chariot, and we shall leave at once for the banks of the auspicious Ganges. Feeling reassured, Sita climbed aboard the large chariot, and Lakshman jumped up next to Sumantra in the front. The charioteer urged on the horses, and they set off for the forest. After journeying for most of the day, they arrived at the riverbank, close to Valmiki's ashram. The tree travelers got down and offered their respects to the holy river, bowing their heads to the ground. I don't know how we're going to end. It's somewhere in the middle here. But you all know what happens. Thinking of Ram's order that he had to return at once, Lakshman looked at Sita, who was kneeling by the side of the river offering prayers. The time had come to leave her. She would have no difficulty finding Valmiki's ashram, which lay only a short distance away along the smooth forest path. Ashamed of himself for abandoning the queen, the prince did not want to enter the ashram. He sighed deeply. Now he would have to tell Sita the truth. Losing control of himself, he suddenly let out a great cry and fell to the earth. Sita looked up in surprise. "What ails you, O Lakshman? We are here by the banks of the sacred Ganges and about to see the great rishis. Why do you wail at such a happy moment? You are making me sad. I know you are always by Ram's side. Is that the separation from him? Is it that the separation from him for even 2 days is so intolerable, O hero? Take heart. Ram is just as dear to me, but I do not give way to such sorrow." Sita asked Lakshman to take her to the ascetic's hermitage. "Let us spend a single night with those sages, dear Lakshman, and then return to Ram's presence." Lakshman slowly got up. His face was covered with tears, and his body trembled. He folded his palms and replied with difficulty, "O auspicious one, my heart feels as though pierced with a dart. I have been entrusted with a task that will make me worthy of the whole world's censure. Surely I would rather die." Sita was mystified. She had no idea what he meant. Feeling perturbed, she asked, "What's wrong, my dear brother? Is something amiss with Ram? Speak out the truth at once." Lakshman sighed. Glancing downwards, he said, "O Janaki, before we left Ayodhya, your husband was told about a most painful rumor circulating among the people. The words he heard cannot be repeated by me. Yet even though you have been proven to be free from blame by the gods themselves," Ram could not ignore the complaints. Struck with grief, he ordered me to bring you here and then return alone. O gentle lady, you have been forsaken by him out of fear of disrepute." Lakshman broke off, too pained to continue. Sita stood as though petrified. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. Had she been born only to experience grief? Covering her face with her 2 bejeweled hands, she dropped to the earth with a piteous wail. Getting a grip on himself, Lakshman said, "Do not give way to sorrow, O queen. Here is Valmiki's delightful ashram. Approach him for shelter and live here peacefully. Remain loyal to your husband. Observe fast and practice prayer and meditation. Keeping Ram forever in your heart, you will doubtlessly secure your everlasting welfare." Sita fainted and lay on the ground, looking like a flower creeper bedecked with blossoms and torn from a tree. Coming round after some moments, she began to lament, "Alas, this mortal frame was certainly fashioned by the Creator simply for sorrow. Indeed, today it seems like the very embodiment of grief. What sin did I commit that I should suffer in this way? How can I live all alone in the hermitage of the sages? What will I say to those ascetics when they ask me why I was abandoned by the great Raghava? I would at once drown myself in the flowing Ganges, but I would thus break Ram's line by killing his unborn child. O Lakshmana, do what you must. Forsake me, the miserable one, but listen first to what I have to say now." Sita got to her feet. Shaking with sorrow, she held on to a tree for support as she spoke to Lakshman. "O tiger among men, go then to Ayodhya and leave me here. After offering my respects to all my seniors, please say this to my lord, O Raghava, You should always act in such a way as to ensure your unrivaled fame in this world. Surely my abandonment is necessary to save you from ill repute. Thus, although torn by grief, I feel no anger. For a chaste woman, the husband is the master, deity, and preceptor. Having spoken her message for Ram, Sita dropped again to the ground. Lakshman looked at her with tear-filled eyes. Unable to make any reply, he cried loudly and bowed his head to the earth. He then walked around Sita with folded palms. After regaining his balance of mind, he said, O faultless one, to say farewell, I now look upon your face for the first time. Oh, how can I bear to see you separated from Ram and dwelling in the deep forest? Crying, Lakshman bowed again to Sita and then ascended his chariot where Sumantra sat in silent sorrow. He urged on the horses and the chariot moved off. As he went along the path away from the river, the grief-stricken Lakshman could hear Sita's plaintive cries echoing through the woods, resembling those of a peacock calling for its mate. Shortly after Lakshman had left, a couple of young ascetics were walking in the woods to gather firewood when they heard Sita's sobs. Spying her through the trees, they ran back to their hermitage and spoke to Valmiki. Sir, some noble lady looking exactly like the goddess of fortune lies near the riverbank, crying loudly in despair. Perhaps she has descended from the heavens. She certainly does not deserve any pain or sorrow. In our view, she is a divine woman who has sought your shelter, O Lord. We feel she is worthy of your protection. Valmiki could understand everything by virtue of his inner vision. Taking up an offering of Ayodhya, he went quickly toward the river, followed by his disciples. The effulgent sage found Sita lying with her arms outstretched, weeping. He spoke to her comfortingly. O gentle one, I know you are Dasarath's daughter-in-law and the beloved queen of Ram. I am Valmiki. Welcome to my hermitage. By my meditations I have understood why you are here. Indeed, all that exists within the three worlds is known to me. I thus know of your purity and blamelessness. O child, be composed and accept this offering. Come with me to the ashram of the female ascetics. They will surely take care of you as if you were their own daughter. It will be exactly like your own home. She bowed respectfully to the sage and accepted the arghya he was offering. She replied, Let it be as you say, O great Rishi. Valmiki led the way to the ladies' ashram. As they reached the secluded and delightful part of the woods, some of the elder ladies came out to greet them. One of them asked, What would you have us do, O greatest of sages? Valmiki introduced Sita to the ladies and asked that they take good care of her. He told them that she was expecting Ram's child and should be offered all affection and respect exactly as they would show the sage himself. Receiving their assurances, he then returned back to his own ashram. Sita began to reside with the ascetics, her mind always wrapped in thought of Ram. And there's a break in the writing. I think that's where we'll end. So, does anyone here that did not receive and would like to receive those two documents that explain what we just read, like the reason behind and all of that? You've all received it. Okay. Even with the explanation, it's still like, what? But Sita came from the earth and is going to return to the earth, and in between there's, transcendental emotion of all variety, but really big on the joy side and really big on the sorrow side, and all other varieties of emotion. Something that for me is solace is in the fifth canto of the Bhagavatam, which is really a difficult, the Vedic cosmology is really difficult to understand, to say the least. But one of the sections in the central island of Bhumandal is Jambudweep, and Jambudweep has in its middle Sumeru, an upside-down golden mountain with the broader part at the top and the narrow part at the bottom. And around the sides of Sumeru are 9 varshas. 9, 4, 8 varshas? 9 varshas. 9 varshas. And one of those varshas is where Hanuman is. Kim Purusha Varsha. And what he's doing in Kim Purusha Varsha is, according to the 5th canto Bhagavatam, he's with others that are just, like he asked, they're just forever reciting the glories of Ram. And so there's a series of 8 prayers, some about Ram, or some about Hanuman, some spoken by Hanuman, but 2 of them, he says, in really strong language, it's not possible that Ram could ever be separated from Sita or Lakshman. It's not possible. Any more than the sunshine can be separated from the sun. It's not possible. So what does that mean? They're separated. So the solace is, it's a lila. It's a lila that has sorrow. And just circling back to, the very, very beginning, in Ayodhya when Ram is banned, everything's nice, and all of a sudden this reversal. And everyone's sorrowful. Different feelings of sorrow, and everyone's feeling it. And it's like, I can't keep reading this. It's too sad. So, Rupa Goswami explains it this way, that one of the 7 secondary rasas is this one. And the secondary rasas are meant to enhance and nourish the primary rasa. And it's not, material emotion doesn't work the same way. But the way that spiritual emotion works is it nourishes, astonishment. It's chivalry. It's a secondary rasa. It's not the primary rasa, but it nourishes the primary rasa. So there's a lot of this sorrow and sorrow and sorrow. And there's Sanskrit terminology that goes with it, but it's really strong, and you really just feel lots of sorrow. But the net result is concentration goes to Ram. Now, the concentration that goes to Ram could be sorrowful, but concentration goes to Ram. And that's the elevating principle. And for those that are reading it, or those that are narrating it, those that are hearing it, what to speak of those who are participating, Ram is stimulating their primary rasa and nourishing their primary rasa through this secondary rasa. And Sumandra and Lakshman and Ram himself and certainly Sita and the rishis in Valmiki's ashram and the ladies, and everyone's having their primary relationship with Krishna being nourished by this secondary rasa. And according to what Rupa Goswami writes, or at least what according to, I think it's Jiva Goswami in his commentary writes, maybe directly in the verses, Ram is the Lord of that secondary rasa. He's the Lord of that second, so there's a lot of it. He's the Lord of it. It nourishes the primary rasa. So that Hanuman says it is like confirmation of what Rupa Goswami says, or vice versa. That's the solace. And otherwise, it's like really sad. And then it comes again, then it comes again, then it comes again. Whew. We discussed this a little bit, from a different perspective the other day. Let's see if there's some discussion on whatever you'd like to discuss.
Hi, Krishna Guru Maharaj. I'm thinking in the sense of women having a dignity. So here seems Mother Sita was rejected twice by Lord Ram.
Yes.
But she still never ever lost the sense of respect or love for Lord Ram. But I'm just thinking in the sense of being in this material world, being in a woman body, I'm not able to understand the gap. Where should start from, at least.
What's the question? You're not able to understand.
So, but if anything like this happen in any practical of any woman life,
She's
should she
upside
have
down.
some sense of dignity, or I don't know.
Is there a sense of what specifically? What's your question? Is there a sense of culpability?
Dignity, that she was being rejected, but she still.
So what's your question? I understand what happened.
So being in a
if it happens to somebody of this world that's in a woman's body, what's the punchline of the question?
So she's losing respect, but should she still bear that, and may not be able to have respect and love for that particular person, or
Well, love is transcendental. Reality is transcendental. During the discussion in the afternoon session, there was a discussion about happiness. And happiness is not, in the duality realm, happiness is in the transcendental realm. So love is also not in the duality realm, it's in the transcendental realm. Real love is in the transcendental realm. And real love, this is kind of like a real basic teaching that Prabhupada said on a number of occasions. And if my memory serves me right, it's something that George Harrison writes in his introduction to Krishna book, or preface, or whatever it is, that, love, the tendency to want to love and be loved is misplaced, and is properly placed when it's reposed on Krishna. So transcendental love is transcendental love. It's not conditional, and it's reposed on something that's infallible. Ajita. There's Jita and there's Ajita. So the real love, the transcendental real love, is with Krishna at the center. And as as much as any relationship has Krishna at the center, that it has a transcendental aspect. Now, the transcendental aspect teaches us that sometimes and sometimes it looks like, or the material duality looks like the spiritual, but it's not. And the spiritual may look like the material, but it's not. So this, it's a little bit like the first question that was asked in our discussion this morning. Our life goes on, and sometimes there's hardship, sometimes it's crisis, sometimes it's calamity, and sometimes. So how do you maintain stability? That was the question. So when there's shelter, but shelter in transcendence, not shelter in the temporary. Because all of what we've been hearing in the Uddhava Gita discussion is the temporary doesn't provide that shelter. It looks good. Pious activity leads to, prosperity on the heavenly realm, and looks good. And then it's gone. So then it's crash again, because you lost it, that happiness and whatever it is that you had. So real shelter, that stability that's unwavering is when the object of love is the perfect object. And that's Krishna. Or Lord Ramachandra, the perfect object. And look at what Sita's going through, but she doesn't lose it because she has perfect shelter. Now she has feelings. She has feelings of sorrow. I'm reminded of, as I'm speaking this, I'm reminded of Dhruva's mother. Now that's a mother-son relationship, not a husband-wife relationship. But when she saw her son smashed, and she heard from others who had witnessed what happened, she was told, she felt really bad. So it's not bad feelings as what, you don't have any bad feelings when you're in transcendence. She had bad feelings. But she directed those feelings to elevate her son by X, Y, and Z things. You've heard these descriptions. She advised him, don't ill wish anyone. Same that Sita had said to Hanuman about the Rakshasis. Don't ill wish anyone. That adage that she had heard from somewhere, a bear and a lion or something like that. So having emotion that looks sad or sorrowful or hurt in transcendence, that's there. This is here because that's there. But she's fixed in transcendence. She advised her son the path of higher consciousness. And she didn't say, you're wrong for feeling these ways. Just don't get in a get-back mood. And what your stepmother said was right. I mean, she didn't say you have a nice stepmother, but she just supported what she said. Take shelter of Vishnu. So, and that's what he did, because he trusted his mother. And, the whole thing is just an amazing story. I'm going to the forest. So what mother is going to let a 5-year-old boy go off to the forest alone? No way. It's against motherhood. It can't happen. She did it with full confidence that the Supreme Lord would protect her son. And sure enough, the Supreme Lord more than protected her son. But she had that kind of faith. So she was able to maintain because she had that kind of faith or relationship. Now, where did she get that? She got from Swayambhuva Manu, at least. Not from Uttanapada, but the relationship of her being fixed was from the source, and through someone that had it and gave it to her, and her receiver was on, and so that's like that story, and that's how it's possible, even other than the goddess of fortune. She had because she's the goddess of fortune, and those that aren't the goddess of fortune can have if they have that shelter. Now, easier said than done, but that's how it's possible. So we cultivate access to that shelter and detachment from the temporary, which is what this whole Uddhava Gita section is about. At least so far, 4 chapters. It's like a machine gun. Bullet after bullet after bullet on a knowledge and detachment, so one can be factually attached. That's what the Bhagavatam is helping us to become actually attached. The obstacle is temporary attachments, thinking something other than transcendence, having attachments for other than transcendence. For example, thinking I'm a woman, or I'm a man. I'm listening to a section, the end of chapter 8, after Kunti does all of her prayers, and Yudhishthira asks Krishna to stay. He stays. The final part is Yudhishthira's lamentation, and his lamentation is, I've not protected my citizens. He specifically, Prabhupada spoke on it at length. Women are not protected. The children are protected. The elderly are not protected. Look at me. What a wretched person. Now, Krishna wanted him to do what he did, so there was nothing wrong, but he was thinking of that sense of protection. Because he's a king. That's what kings do. Kshatriya, protect from harm. And I failed. So you can have feelings. And, the course correction for those feelings is attachment to Krishna. That's one of the things that Krishna wanted, that even Krishna could not uplift, so that Bhishma Dev could uplift, to shine the spotlight on the glorious grandfather Bhishma. And it worked. And the way that it worked was, this is the plan of the Supreme Lord. Right? And it worked, because it was. Now that's when you're attached to the Supreme Lord. And if you're not attached to the Supreme Lord, then it's the ocean of waves going up and down and all around. Lifetime after lifetime. Whatever the species and whatever the gender, whatever the nation, whatever the color, whatever the... And so the opportunity to get out of that ocean is attachment to transcendence, attachment to the Supreme Person. Until then, it's going to be a rough ride. So our scriptures are filled with helping us to become freed from that, including this. Like it really hurts. I'm not in a woman's body, and it really hurts. Who can imagine? So how did she pull through? Which is your question. Complete faith. No other shelter. That's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teaching. My dear Lord, you can do with me whatever you like. And that's easy to say. It's a nice verse. You can embrace me, you can neglect me, you can trample me. You can do whatever you like. Only one thing. Causeless devotional service, birth after birth. That's the place we want to go to. And until we get there, it's a rough ride. Even hearing transcendence, as we discussed earlier on this topic yesterday, even hearing transcendence, we have our, flash points or trigger points. We get triggered and, we're in some other, like what happened. Even when it's transcendence is the topic. Or to speak of when it's not transcendence isn't the topic, it's just something, some event in this world of duality. Okay, let's see if there's something else. How about anything from your notes for this evening? No? Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. What kind of social system was there in Valmiki Rishi's ashram? The way described, many women living there, and are they vanaprastha or they are sannyasis, or what kind of system they have there?
I don't know of any description. There's all that we do here is there's certainly celibate men and there's ascetic women, and they don't mix. We know that that for how long was Kayadu in Narada's ashram, and for how long was Shabari in the sage Matunga's ashram. So there's not a lot of description about, what the social scene was like, but they're ascetics. So whether they're formally sannyasis or formally vanaprasthas is not really so much important. They're ascetics, and they're singularly focused. And just like this little passage, at least the way that it's written, the assistants, they were compassionate, and they went to Valmiki, please give her shelter. They don't want to see her suffer like this. So what the social structure was is not clearly spelled out. At least, this much we know. There's some ascetic women in Valmiki's ashram. We don't know any more details about Narada's ashram other than Kayadu was there. Whether there were other ladies, we don't hear. Same with Matunga's ashram. Doesn't appear to be there was other ladies, but we don't hear specifically.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. I was wondering why Lord Ram chose not to reveal the rumor to Mother Sita before sending her away, and Lakshmana was put in the spot to reveal the truth.
And Lakshmana was what?
Put in a spot to reveal the truth to Mother Sita after reaching the ashram. Is there any lesson to learn from that or significance?
You want to answer that one? Give him the microphone. I don't have any immediate thought.
So the instruction was given to Mother Sita through Lakshmana, as one of the Vaishnavacharyas, Sri Vaishnavacharyas says that because this is a totally different version of our Gaudiya Sampradaya, but the reason is because she was offensive to Lakshmana when Rama went behind Maricha and then Lakshmana refused to go under the instruction of Sita, and Sita used some heavy words against Lakshmana, and that's a Vaishnava aparad. And since she committed a Vaishnava aparad, Rama wants Sita to go through that, irrespective of being his own consort. He wants her to go through that separation, and that message has to be conveyed by the one who has been offended. And it's a similar situation like how when Sugriva and Vali was fighting, and the first attempt, Rama did not kill Vali, and Sugriva comes back and says, you asked me to fight and then you're not taking any action. And Rama says, I couldn't find the difference between you and your brother. But that's not the real reason. The real reason was Sugriva was very much attached to Rama, neglecting Lakshmana. So he was focusing on Rama, not the devotees of Rama. He was neglecting the devotees of Rama, only wanting to serve Rama directly. Therefore, in this time, Rama told Lakshmana to garland Sugriva, in that way the offense has been removed. It's a similar situation over here also. That's the explanation is given from the Sri Vaishnava perspective. Thank you.
There's another added point to what you just said. One Acharya comments, I don't see any difference between you and Vali. Vali was an offender, you're an offender. Because, in other words, how can Ram be a liar? How can he say, I can't tell the difference between you, when he's omniscient? So he can't lie. So what does it mean when he said that? That's one explanation at least. Okay. Anything else? Yes.
So one of my questions is like, why did Lord Ram decide to abandon Sita in the Valmiki's hermitage? I mean, one of them was that he promised her to stay for one day, but is there instead of taking her to her parents' home, like Janaka and those, why did he decide to take her there? And then the other one was not sure if it's possible to find out, but what did King Janaka think when did he is there some explanation of what he was thinking when he found out what happened to her?
For the first reason, there's an outcome that was facilitated by going to Valmiki's ashram, and that outcome was that Love and Kush could then be trained in Valmiki's recitation of Valmiki's Ramayana, and that they could absorb themselves in glorifying Ram going into the future, and they eventually became the next king. So, but that doesn't answer. So, the part of the not yet unfolded part of the Leela was Love and Kush would be trained in reciting Ram's pastimes, and that the one to do that was Valmiki, not Janaka. Now that's just a practical understanding of why Valmiki instead of Janaka. And how did Janaka feel? That's a good question. Now, Janaka is not just a father, he's a Mahajan. So as a Mahajan, like the other Mahajans, they understood who is Bhagavan. So how does Janaka understand that my daughter is married to Bhagavan? And so whatever Bhagavan does is beyond scrutiny. Now maybe that's Janaka's understanding. Maybe he understood exactly why Ram did what he did, because he's a Mahajan, not just a father. You any insights on this one? How did Janaka take it? That's it. Okay.
But I just want to add
Okay. Microphone.
the explanation is given where the previous night, like Maharaj, you just said about Sita wants to go
Yeah.
to the forest. The further explanation is given by the commentaries where she expressed that she wants to have her delivery among the sages in the ashram. That's explicitly told in the commentaries. And then regarding Janaka, it's unlike our today's current situation where the in-laws get interfered in the decision of husband and wife. That's not the culture those days. Once they give the girls off, they let the family to deal the situation, good or bad. They don't really get interfere into the situation. And that's not what Sita decided to have also, to go to her parents' place to deliver. She wants to go to the sages. Thank you.
Not interfering is one thing. How did Janaka feel about it is another thing. But, his feelings are guided by transcendental knowledge, not guided by worldly, fatherly, and other kinds of worldly feelings, because he's a Mahajan. And Sita is the goddess of fortune.
I guess that's why his name is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, Krishna takes his name as an example.
Okay, delicate topic, huh? Any other delicate questions from our delicate topic? I don't see any hands. Do we have anything online?
Yes, Maharaj. There is one. I guess it's been already answered, but I can still read the question. From Sanjari Dasi Mataji. Apologies if you had already covered this. How do we understand Lord Ram not telling Sita Devi directly that she was going to be banished? I think it's been covered.
Okay. Okay, we're done. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.